What's up everybody, and welcome back to another Metroid Prime 4 update video, which is the first one of 2021 on this channel. We have an exciting update to share, and yet again, this appears to be the first time it is being revealed on YouTube, that I'm aware of at least, and I haven't seen anything like this posted yet, so please be sure to share this video around to your fellow Metroid fans, and hit the like button on the video if you enjoy it, since this is a very important update with what we are revealing and the direction of Retro Studios is taking with the game and its story, and we'll also be going over why this does appear to be the year that we'll hopefully finally see a trailer or teaser of some sort for Metroid Prime 4. So as you might be aware of, for the most part, Retro Studios has been quiet on the development of Metroid Prime 4 since officially and publicly taking over the project in an announcement over 2 years ago by Nintendo, stating the series will be going back to them after a failed attempt at making Metroid Prime 4 in-house and combining multiple other developers with little to no experience making Metroid games. And as the years have progressed, we've gotten multiple awesome updates, from digging and exploring through what type of things Retro Studios has been working on with the game in terms of job types they've been hiring for, and namely the kind of technology experience they require for this game, which is always very exciting since it gives fans an idea of where Retro Studios is taking Metroid Prime 4's world and how detailed with the latest technologies the game could end up being. We've also, along the way of this development cycle of Metroid Prime 4, have gotten confirmation of names of developers revealed who have been hired by Retro Studios to work on various things in Metroid Prime 4, like its art direction, first-person gameplay mechanics, and just general previous game experience. And just some examples of this are with people who have worked on God of War 2018, Tomb Raider, Call of Duty, Crysis, and even Halo, so the quote-unquote quadruple A talent is definitely there. Now, one thing that has been a topic of debate for years now with Metroid Prime 4, dating back all the way to the end of Metroid Prime 3 and some hints from Metroid Prime Federation Force, is what direction will be taken in its story. Now, I think it's good to point out and to make very clear that fans need to remember that the story elements are very likely to be told differently than previous Metroid Prime games, but also different from other recent Metroid games that weren't developed by Retro Studios, namely Metroid Other M. That's a topic that continues to also come up, in that fans have been worried or scared even that any big story elements or emotional dialogue or in-depth story in general at all due to what happened with Metroid Other M. So we all need to be very clear, Retro Studios has no relation whatsoever to Team Ninja and the developer who made Metroid Other M. So I think worrying too much about the story direction in this case of Metroid Prime 4 isn't really warranted, and we need to wait and see the game in full before prejudging it in a bad way. So with all that in mind, there is however a really exciting update in terms of where the story and the characters might be heading, and who Retro Studios has now confirmed to hire for one of, if not the story writer for Metroid Prime 4, and that is none other than Megan Fausti. Now, when I found this and did some research in the last game she wrote large parts of the story for and the characters, I got really excited because this feels like, to me at least, exactly what I wanted in terms of the kind of story writer I would have preferred for Metroid Prime 4. The last game Megan Fausti wrote was for Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order, and if you played Fallen Order for yourself and are a Star Wars fan, you probably were very happy like I was with how the story in that game was, and for me, Jedi Fallen Order was better in my opinion than most of the recent Star Wars movies. It had very well acted scenes, a great story with twists and turns and emotional changes in the characters as you progressed, all without turning melodramatic of course. It was as close to a perfect Star Wars story for a video game that I could have asked for, and a lot of the reason for that turns out to be due to the great writing of Megan Fausti. She wrote some very diverse and interesting characters, as you can see here in this photo, as she posted from her Twitter page on the characters that she was responsible for in Jedi Fallen Order, including one of my favorite characters. So let's just take a quick look at an example of Megan's talent here in action for that character. Take a look at this.
I won't let you manipulate me.
So sure are you? When faced with a choice to protect herself or her Padawan, she chose self-interest. She'll sell you out too.
Well, I can handle myself.
Can you afford to take that chance? Your new master harbors great darkness. The look on her face when she saw what they had done to me, as I am now. She turned, exposing her true nature. She used the dark side.
She cut herself off from the Force.
Oh? How long before she cracks and betrays you too? Is that who you want beside you when you find the holocron? What would Jaro Tapal say?
You have no right to mention his name.
I wonder, what would he think if he could see his Padawan now, skulking in the shadows with a betrayer, granting her access to a legion of impressionable students?
No, I won't let anyone touch them.
I thought the same thing once.
So there we had Trilla, who was a very emotionally disturbed yet extremely smart and determined villain in Jedi Fallen Order, who had a lot of good scenes written by Megan and had a really interesting backstory you find out as you progress in the game. Also, on top of all this, it is very interesting that back in 2019 when Jedi Fallen Order was being previewed, you may have remembered in various interviews with the developer of that game, Respawn, they said that Metroid Prime was in fact one of the influences of Jedi Fallen Order. And if you played Jedi Fallen Order, you probably could see for yourself the Metroid Prime influence with the 3D multi-leveled map and many of the puzzle elements to create branching paths and the aspect of returning to previous locations you once were at the beginning to unlock new previously unexplored areas due to unlocking a new ability in another area of the game. Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order felt very much like a Metroid Prime game in the Star Wars universe for me in many ways, minus of course the combat, which was more like other third-person action games like Sekiro Shadows Die Twice and Tomb Raider or Uncharted. So it's kind of a small world, so to speak, in the video game landscape that one of the developers involved in the story of Jedi Fallen Order, not the design of how Fallen Order was, which in many ways, as we said, was similar to Metroid Prime, is actually coming in to write the story in Metroid Prime 4. And for me, I think that all these connections are just amazing. Now, to go along with this good news of Retro Studios hiring Megan, it was also discovered that they hired her right around June or July of 2020. So she's been well involved and busy with writing the story for a while already, and we are just now finding it out months later. This confirmation of Megan Fausti also lines up perfectly with Retro Studios' other recent hirings for cinematics that evoke emotion, which means it's very likely we're going to have some very quote-unquote real moments in Metroid Prime 4 that writer Megan is going to, or perhaps already has written the dialogue for in those planned cutscenes. Also, not to mention all the other dialogue or banter that takes place in games like this. Granted, in a game like Jedi Fallen Order, it is very similar in many ways to Uncharted, where the main character seemed like he was talking a lot to himself and or to his droid companion BD-1. So in relation to that to Metroid Prime 4, I obviously don't expect Samus to be constantly talking all the way through the game, but believe it or not, for me, I actually would welcome some of these more deeper and interesting characters in Metroid Prime 4 for Samus to face against, something that inspires the audience to think more about the characters to connect to them and each of their backstories. And if Retro Studios has hired Megan here to do just that, I think it's a very good sign for the game's story. The best way to give a story or even a boss battle or level encounter more weight is to give the player some emotional tie-in for what is going on in the story so that they can feel connected to the actions they perform, which in turn will change the outcome of the story. Metroid Prime 1, which is basically my favorite game of all time, does have a story and backstory that is told, but mostly in reading text from scanning lore in the world. And back in 2002 on the GameCube, that worked fine for me while I was playing since the entire world was so atmospheric, and of course that legendary music was pushing me forward. So keeping that in mind, while I personally totally understand that purists who simply want Metroid Prime 1 all over again from Metroid Prime 4 might prefer no spoken dialogue at all for a story like this, we have to acknowledge the facts here in the actions that Retro Studios has taken, hiring for what appears to be a much more in-depth story told in a much more modern way. Probably similar to a Tomb Raider or Fallen Order in some respects. And I think Metroid fans, in my opinion, should be open to that possibility and also to be optimistic about it, since remember, this is Retro Studios handling the game overall, and for me, I know and I trust them in knowing what's best for Metroid Prime. So if that means they can add story elements that are both emotional and have more spoken dialogue in a way that still feels like it's a Metroid Prime game, I'm all for it. And I hope Metroid Prime fans will be excited for that as well. Which is why now, still in early 2021, that I do think we'll be seeing Metroid Prime 4 this year. Many weren't even expecting that Nintendo Direct in February. There were no rumors about it and nothing was really known. And while even though Metroid info would have been nice, Nintendo wanted to focus on some games coming up soon and perhaps save the really big heavy hitters like Zelda and a graphically intense game like Metroid Prime 4 to showcase for later, maybe in April or all the way through to their E3 digital event, which seems likely this year after E3 themselves just announced that yet again, for a public venue, that won't be happening this year, but there will be a lot of digital events going on for all companies. Also, since Retro Studios has been finishing up with getting these hires for cinematics and story writing, and even those playtesters for early builds in Metroid Prime 4 since mid to late 2020, it would appear that not only is an early build, or what developers would call a quote-unquote vertical slice, likely ready to be shown, but also I wouldn't be surprised if they have some cinematics ready to go as well to give a hint at where the story direction is going in a new trailer, for example. And for all those things said, I can't realistically see any reason why a reveal trailer with some gameplay would not be shown this year at some point. I personally just can't see Nintendo waiting until 2022, for example, before showing anything on Metroid Prime 4, is what I'm trying to say. We have all the indications that development is reaching a point where Retro Studios definitely has something to show the world, and right now they are just putting it all together, getting ready for it to be shown. Very, very hopefully this year, in fact. And I also believe that if the heavily reported and now heating up with rumors new Switch console is shown soon, the chances of Nintendo wanting to impress everyone with a teaser for Metroid Prime 4 will increase greatly at that time. And I've brought this up before, but for some of you who are new to the channel, if you do look at Retro Studios' job page and the description of their development studio and company, notice what it says in relation to this. It says that Retro Studios is a state-of-the-art game development studio working in conjunction with Nintendo to bring award-winning games to Nintendo's cutting-edge next-generation platforms. It says it right there, describing what Retro Studios is. And what has been constantly reported on since 2019 by credible sites and sources that we've been talking about and covering here on this channel, well, those have been mentioning things like next-generation Switch, a Super Switch with 4K output capabilities, and Nintendo themselves recently have been saying that they're working with cutting-edge tech, and it just so happens that that's exactly what Retro Studios describes themselves as working on with next-generation platforms by Nintendo that are cutting edge. So all this is definitely something to be considered when looking at how and when Metroid Prime 4 is going to be revealed. It may have a lot to do with hardware Nintendo wants to show it on, and if that new Switch is coming this year in fact, then chances are we'll be seeing a preview of Metroid Prime 4 as well. So when thinking about all the information we covered in this video, we are definitely living in an exciting time, and the future of Nintendo is looking better and better as things continue to give us clarity on what they will be showing us soon. And since we've come this far, I think we can hold out just a little bit longer for the big rewards that will come from this massive game from Retro Studios that is in development, which is Metroid Prime 4.